This is thinking like a CEO, how to thrive, not survive in the AI future. The format, we've got kind of a lot of material. We'll try and do it in 40 minutes, and we're going to go through. I'm going to introduce Graham. We're going to talk about how we can use AI LLMs to make better personal decisions, better investing decisions, be a better person in general, how to like make a super you. But then we're going to go also into an example that kicked off this whole thing that Graham did around investment research, which kind of led to a whole concept of thinking like a CEO and where the nature of work may go. And we're going to take a stab at second order effects that may unfold in the future. Um, we'll nibble at that. Um, quick quick announcement. I gotta say, and this came to me from speaking to Get Graham and meeting with him. I just want to say thanks to all the YWR subscribers. um, there's so many cool people out there we've been interacting, and I've been getting to know you, and I really appreciate all the support. And I know sometimes I say write terrible things, or I make mistakes, or I don't spell check as much as I should, and yet everyone has been super supportive and bared with me, and, and been patient. So I appreciate that, and you're all a good crew. And it's a very good group of people, and lots of cool people out there, and so thank you. But speaking of cool people, we're here with Graham Rowe, um, who I kind of got to meet more recently. Graham is an entrepreneur in South Africa, and he will tell you more about his journey and background and how he came into this. But Graham, we used to email back and forth a little bit about ideas. You just ping me about something, and it was kind of at that level for a while. You were kind of an early subscriber, and I didn't really know much about you, other than that you had a business you were working on in South Africa. And then about a month ago, I think it was a month, you started writing these emails. You sending out these emails about how to use AI, prompts to try out. Here, write, describe this and then paste in that. And I started doing all these things, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool, and this is really thoughtful, and this is a whole new way of using this amazing tool. And I was like, what is going on with this guy? It's like I need to meet Graham. Like, we need to do a Zoom call. And so oh, sorry. The other thing was, you did that research. We're going to talk about it, that research piece on app loving. And I was like, whoa. So we did a Zoom call, and I got to learn what you were doing, the backstory behind it. And I thought, Graham, like, maybe that's a good place to start. Like, I thought your story of kind of how this came to you and you went down this road was maybe a good way to tee us up for everyone.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Eric, and thanks for YWR. I mean, it's been awesome to be a subscriber from pretty early on, and really not like awesome to follow your thoughts week to week. And I'm just glad it's turned into a bit more of a two-way exchange lately, and nice to connect kind of indirectly with a bunch of YWR people through this call. So thanks so much for having me here. Yeah, so maybe I'll start with kind of how did this shift happen for me, that I went from being like a normal casual user of ChatGPT to an obsessive who's writing emails about it every day and harassing people like you to kind of engage in the thoughts. So I was the founder and CEO of a digital health business in South Africa for the last decade plus. Treated about 30,000 people with diabetes, had over 100 employees, so built up quite a big business, and that was kind of 110% of my time for a decade. And got to this, I was using AI kind of casually, the way people do, as part of working on that business, and got to like a really critical point in the life of the business where we had to make a massive kind of one of those irreversible decisions where you kind of go one way and there's no way back after you've made the decision. And I had a recommendation I had to make formally to my board of directors, and I was sort of sitting up in my home office on a Sunday night in that sort of crunch mode. But I'd done a huge amount of analysis and thinking, but I was just stuck. I was in that classic sort of analysis paralysis thing. And I'm normally like a fairly decisive guy, and that's kind of how I got to be a CEO of a company. But I was really stuck, and I was struggling. I wasn't getting to clarity at all. And my engaging with ChatGPT was taking me deeper down the rabbit hole instead of elevating me. You know how it just sympathizes with you, and it'll do
That
any
is, it kind of
analysis you
just, it's
ask.
agreeable. Yes.
Yeah, it's very agreeable, right? So I got to this point where I said, like, this is not working, right? I've got all the information I need. I'm really stuck. I'm at the point where it's like do or die. I need to shift this around. I just kind of did it intuitively because I didn't know much about prompt engineering or really how AI works. I was like a non-expert at that point. So I just started. I mean, I usually dictate into my AI, so I don't use the voice mode. I dictate voice notes, and a couple of hundred words of transcribed text comes out. So I just started dictating, and I said, like, look, thanks for the feedback, but what I really need is a hard-headed, clear-eyed commercial stance in everything that you say back to me from this point onwards. I don't want you to be empathetic. I don't want you to be sympathetic. I'm kind of emotionally struggling to process this. I'm procrastinating. I'm not getting to an answer. I know you as an LLM are coded to be supportive and empathetic. I want you to stop doing that, right? So I'm just talking to this thing, right, trying to get myself
Just
out of this
stop
hole.
acting like this.
Yeah, stop acting like this. And I was like, sort of, I sort of said, like, I'm explicitly and specifically saying that I want you to be commercial, pragmatic, and all the things that I need to be in this moment and that I can be, but that I'm not being right now. So I kind of need you to mirror and emphasize that aspect of myself back, right? So, so of course, it's agreeable. So it just said, understood. I'll take a hard-headed, commercial, and methodical approach.
And a
I'll focus
founder was the
purely.
other thing, right? You said you need to talk like a founder, and
Exactly, right. So it's just immediately the thing switches into rational decision making mode. And I had this really like transformational discussion. So, I'm not saying, hey, write my board letter. Not at all. I'm saying, help me emphasize and mirror this part of myself that I need to kind of catch on to and amplify at this particular point in time. Make me the person that I kind of know I need
yeah,
to
and you
be
were
in this
sitting there
moment, right?
going, I know what I want to sound like at this time,
Yeah,
but I'm not there emotionally, but help me
yeah.
get there. Yes.
Exactly, right. So, and it's kind of, yeah, it's even more than just sound like this. Like, help me actually be this. like feed that part of me which has actually got this, and like, let's get away from the part that isn't. And I had this amazing transformational kind of moment just sitting on my own on a Sunday night where I was like, wow, this just makes so much sense, and I could really strengthen and bolster the part of me that I needed to be strong in that moment, and got to a lot of clarity. And the whole process from there on, the business process was successful from that point forward. But the point of that story is it just sort of woke me up to, hang on, this isn't just like a Q&A engine, like a Google box that gives you some results. It's not just something that can write a document for you. It's not just something that can quickly produce research reports. It's something that you can kind of use you can turn it around as like a mirror or a probe to look into your own mind and actually change aspects of yourself, like actually elevate yourself to be what you need or want to be. So I started getting, really, really kind of obsessed with this whole thing of like AI is more than we think it is. And the way I started with that was just obviously spending, a lot of time experimenting myself and learning the kind of different aspects of how these models work and how prompting works. And then I started writing an email to a few friends, smart people who could help me think it through. And obviously, I'm used to harassing you by replying to YWR emails. So I thought, it would be a natural fit for me to include you. And thanks for joining early in the journey. And it just kind of went from there, that what I would do is share practical prompts. People would use them, and I just started getting such interesting feedback, which is like, I had no idea you could use AI this way, which was kind of the usual thing people would say back to me. Like, or they'd say, I'm too scared to use the prompt, but it looks really interesting. So, I'd have these like super brutal prompts around, you know, tell me what I don't want to hear, analyze what I've been avoiding, like this really like intense stuff.
Can I
And
share
it,
one of the
it was
ones
just,
I liked,
sure, go for it.
Graham?
Yeah.
There was, okay, identify a belief you hold with certainty, something about yourself, your work, your industry, or how the world works. Write or dictate a brief explanation of why you're sure it is true, 1 to 2 sentences. Now paste the following into AI. Art is what you're telling me. Now what this is what the AI is supposed to do. Argue against my belief as if you were designed to eliminate my certainty. Show me the most destabilizing counter arguments. Assume I am resistant to change and find a way to break through. Force me to question my fundamental beliefs.
Yeah,
I
and people, a lot of people are scared to use that prompt, and the people who did
That one is
use it
scary. Like,
said,
I wasn't sure I do want to have those. It might be really good at arguing those. I
yeah.
don't know if I want that one, all those
Yeah,
things upset
I mean,
it.
exactly, and the whole point of AI is that it's inhuman, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of trained on the entire corpus of human thinking, but and it's pre-programmed to be kind of agreeable and sympathetic and whatever. That's the way that the big companies make it. But it'll actually just do pretty much whatever you tell it to do. So if you tell it to be absolutely brutal and dismantle your belief system, it'll just do it casually. It's just more tokens. And that's something that people aren't really aware of. And there's just so much that comes out of that. So there's that brutal truth aspect, but then there's so many different dimensions of how we can shape its thinking. Like, do you want to be emotional or rational? Do you want to be intuitive or analytical? Do you want to be group orientated or individualistic? Do you want to think short term or long term, strategic or tactical? There's so many flavors to thinking, and we all like we so naturally
Mm.
slip into modes, by default. And the AIs also slip into modes. You just get the average of the internet unless you tell it to do something
Can
different.
I say something
Yeah.
I came across is there's a unlike Google search, right? Where if you want the Google search is pretty good. Like sometimes you can type like 2 or 3 words of what you're looking for and it auto completes it. No, and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
it kind of was exactly what I was looking for. I There is a high return on specificity to these LLMs.
Mm,
Adding a little extra context. I want you to sound like this. Put yourself in this position. Use this tone. There's a
mm.
whole big unlock that comes from those extra nuances to prompting.
Exactly.
Uh,
And the reason we don't do it naturally is because as human beings, that's like, most of our brains actually unconsciously devoted to context, right? So the words that are coming out of my mouth now are like, I'm sitting in a Substack live broadcast. This is with Eric. He's a thought leader in this space. We've got this kind of audience. This is the time of day. These are the people who are listening. This is what they want to hear about. All of that stuff is already like preloaded in my brain, and whatever I'm saying is responding to that prompt, right? But we're so used to that we don't realize the AI doesn't have any of that stuff. You need to explicitly tell it every single one of those contextual things if you want to get useful feedback.
Now, Graham, on the super you angle again, there
Yeah.
was another one you wrote that I really liked. And it was tell about a problem or something you are working with. Maybe I'm not getting the prompt totally right. But it's
Mm,
basically
mm,
tell a problem, something you're working through, what you think the different choices are, and how you feel about those different
mm,
roads you can take and the risks or something.
mm.
And then you ask the AI, listen to analyze what I've just told you, and do you see patterns of beliefs and kind of trapping fears in that in what I've just told you? And it's like
Yeah.
this is
What are,
what
what are
like
the underlying
psychologists talk about all the
fears?
time, right?
Exactly. So, like, what are the underlying fears that I'm not consciously aware of? What are the underlying beliefs that might be mistaken? So, like, I mean, think about how we talk to people every day, right? In the back of your head, you're talking to someone, you think this guy's really missing the point, or he's obviously hasn't realized this about like why he's responding this way. But we don't say that. Like, no one
Oh,
says
this
that.
was a great point,
We don't
Graham.
say it, right? So you're sitting having coffee, or you're in a business meeting, or whatever. Like, we say kind of like less than 10% of what we think, right?
Oh, and we all know, right? Like, yes, the
Yeah.
guy, you're like, oh my God, that guy is making the biggest mistake of his life. But we all know the polite thing is to just nod and be
And
supportive.
yeah, and
And
the
there's no,
cost
and don't burn the bridge and tell he will,
exactly.
even if you think you're giving him this great advice, he's going to totally take it the wrong way and be angry at you.
Yeah,
So better not to ever say anything, right?
for
So we
sure.
all
So there's
know.
this. So like
Yeah.
90% of human thoughts go to waste because people are scared of the conflict, and rightly so. It's energy
Yes.
sapping. It's painful. It destroys relationships, whatever. But AI doesn't have those qualms. Like AI will burn a bridge. You just need to tell it burn the bridge, and it'll burn the bridge immediately. It's got
Yes.
absolutely no holdbacks, whatever. And the amazing thing that people also don't realize is like it can read implicit patterns in what you're saying. So like you can ask it, you can dictate a voice note and say like weird stuff, like analyze the lexical patterns in the way that I talk. What are the biases in the types of words that I use? What emotions that I'm not aware of are implicit in the way that I'm talking? And you'll get like really sensible, profound answers. So it's kind of like this super brain that will tell you like anything you ask it. And the hard part is knowing what to ask because we're not used to talking to people that way. And in
And oh,
fact, you'd
by
be
the
a
way,
complete weirdo if you spoke to people that way, right?
another concept that you came up with, I would just will side angle 3D
Yeah.
chess on this is that it can make you a super you, but also realize that it's probably making everyone else a super you too, right? And if
Yes.
you're not doing
Yeah.
it, everyone is just to kind of like, where do we go with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But so this kind of led me to this advice thing and telling me what you really think led to another concept that you had early on, which was this panel of experts that you
Yeah.
can create.
Yeah.
And I probably tell my wife, like, I think my wife is sick of hearing about my thoughts on my business
Yeah.
ideas or what I think about. She like, I have just no one, but I have no one else to like download all this stuff into, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, actually, why am I? This is a groundbreaking. I could create, like, say you have some venture, some new business you want to create.
Mm.
This is was Charlie Munger's a service that you
Yeah,
created,
exactly.
right?
So like I'm a huge Charlie Munger fan, just like probably everyone who's on this live stream, right? And I've read all the blog posts. I read Charlie Munger, Charlie's Almanac. I kind of like I've done it all. And the amazing thing is he's got these like lattice work of mental models he calls it,
He's got some
and it
sixth
sounds
thing, right?
there's
What's it
like
called?
over 20, right? So this
Oh,
is
he's got 20.
amazing.
I think.
So the problem is you like read the book and you're like, wow, this is amazing. I should apply this to my business. And then you actually get into it and you're like, okay, here I've got a list of 20 models. Now I need to like think through every single angle of my business. So if you're Charlie Munger, that's obviously easy, right? But if you're me, it's like this is going to take me like an entire weekend and a lot of coffee to do this. So the idea is you just say to AI, you are Charlie Munger. I made a specific prompt where I sort of ordered the prompts from like where you would start. So you'd start with stuff like first principle thinking, and then you'd end with like what he calls like Lollapalooza effect, which is this sort of cascading, interrelated, multiple effects.
He
Go
has
through
that.
all
That's one of
20
his things.
frameworks. Sorry?
That's one of his matrix things.
Yeah,
The
it's
Lollapalooza.
Lollapalooza effect. Yeah,
Oh wow, that's
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
guy's cooler than
So,
I
so,
thought.
so he's got like this long list, right? And you can just say to AI, "Here's my idea. Here's my concept. Analyze it against every single one of these systematically, and then give me an integrated report on what Charlie Munger would think of my business." Now, is that going to be what Charlie would say? No, but it's going to be a hell of a lot better than I could do without like a few hours of like relentlessly ticking through logical items. So and as you said just now, like, well, if everyone's doing that and you're not, is the quality of your ideas and thinking actually going to keep up, right? So it's creating this
And
kind of
also, you
rising
could put
tide, right?
together a bunch of these, right? You're like, hey, I want to start a new business. I want Charlie Munger on my board of directors. I want Elon Musk. I want Warren Buffett. I don't know who it is, like you think is a great person.
Exactly.
And also but it's helpful in this whole thing that you knew the Charlie Munger matrix. I think it helps if you could add that. The AI might pick that up on its own as when it's trying to
So
figure out how. Right.
here's another thing is like, I kind of do it iteratively. So I'll actually just pick up my phone and talk to ChatGPT and say, hey, so Charlie Munger's got this lattice work of mental models. List them out for me. The first
Mm.
prompt. Here's the list. Then I'll say, hey, let's think about what order you'd apply them in if you were trying to solve business problems. Boof, there's the list. Okay, I'll say, okay, that's great. Like, let's think about what questions we'd need to ask someone if Charlie was to process their things. Boof. And I'll sort of build it up iteratively. So I don't sit down at my keyboard and type out like these are the models and whatever. It's a conversation with my
Oh,
AI as
you
kind of
kind of
an
get
analyst.
there.
So the AI is sort of my analyst and like prompt constructor, and we have a conversation which might go on for 5 minutes or might go on for an hour, and the prompt is the result of all of that kind of research, right? As opposed to me sitting down and typing on my keyboard to kind of make it come out of my head. The only thing I need to bring as a human being is this concept that I know Charlie Munger's a really interesting thinker and he's got this lattice work and we want to apply it. But like the heavy lifting, even of making the prompt, is done by AI in my case, right?
So we're gonna go on to the next. So that was like kind of the
Yeah.
panel of experts concept.
Mm.
And now this next part, which is kind of, I think I want to tee this up by saying, I think what's really interesting about this AI tool is that I think it's like Excel for language, I call it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think of in the kind of investment analysis or economics, we have so many tools for processing numbers, right? We've got statistics, regression analysis, we've got databases, we've got Excel, we've got all these tools for slicing, dicing, and seeing numerical patterns.
Mm.
we now have a tool, which I don't even know where it's going to go, but for now, it's the first time you can analyze behavioral or language patterns, which is kind of, which is getting into your research report
Mm.
that you did, which was a mind splattering experience for me. um,
For
so
me too. For me too.
no,
Thanks for
loved
joining me
it.
on the ride.
So I'm going to give the backstory.
Please, yeah.
I wrote a post a few weeks ago about estimate revisions and why I find estimate revision momentum interesting, why it's a signal for stock investing, and the kind of behind that, what's often happening is that something fundamental is changing to a business or an industry. And the reason the experts keep adjusting the numbers every month is because of anchoring bias, which is kind of a behavioral thing where you have a hard time switching your whole mental frame of the world from X to Y, and you kind of do it gradually. Whereas, and the idea and the start and the money making angle of this is if you can see that this is happening, it you can just the money making thing is to jump to the end state and
Mm.
just this is actually we're going to go from X to Y, and these guys are going to move 10% at a time, but actually I can see that, I mean, there's a whole bigger thing unfolding that the market is slow to realize, for lots of reasons. But you kind of took that post and then went totally down the rabbit hole. And um do you want to explain what you
Yeah.
did?
So I mean, yeah.
The stock is app
I love
loving, right? Which
YWR.
isn't
Yeah,
really that
yeah,
relevant, but
yeah.
I mean,
So I love YWR. I really look forward to Eric's thoughts every week, and you should subscribe if you're unsubscribed and you're listening.
oh, I love that.
And
Thank you.
there we go, for sure. So Eric always has these like really interesting, counterintuitive, contrarian, but right some of the time
Yeah.
ideas, right? And it really stimulates your thinking. And so the one was like, why do analysts keep getting earnings wrong consistently? Like it's this really bizarre pattern, and there's
Right? The
alpha there.
guy's an
So
expert. He sat with the
yeah,
CEO. He knows more about the company than anybody, and yet he
yeah,
gets it wrong every month.
and
Right? Okay.
and this resonated with me because there's a couple of companies. I mean, I'm like a very small time amateur retail investor, but there are a couple of companies I own where every quarter the analysts are under, and they just can't seem to understand what's going on. And I just noticed that when I look at the quarterly earnings. So it resonated with me straight away. And then I wrote to Eric and I just said, "Oh, this is awesome, love the piece, whatever." And he wrote back and said, "Well, what if we used some of the AI thinking to kind of look at this?" And I thought, well, hang on, because this is exactly the same as my problem. Like we think the opening story, I'm a CEO and I need to get out of the wrong mindset and into the right mindset. I'm going to use AI as a power up to take my thinking to where it needs to be. So the AI is not doing the thinking for me. It's kind of boosting my mind in the correct direction. So I was like, well, what if you could use AI to boost your thinking as an analyst? Because it's like this cognitive barrier. Like I know I need to go there, but I'm too stuck in my old way of thinking. How do I use AI to break those barriers and actually accelerate me to where I need to be thinking about this company so that my estimates are correct? And if my estimates are correct, I can make money. So that's the big
But can
idea.
I say what you did? That was
Yeah.
sorry, I'm jumping. I'm
Yeah. Go
impatient.
for it.
You so I went out in the, I okay. So Graham tells his AI, I want you to write 11,000 words on app loving. This company, which was getting into the business of advertising placement into video games, which is a difficult thing to do. It's hard to place
Yeah.
ads into video games. It's been a thing that could, like a pot of gold if anyone can figure it out. So um, here it says step one, AI. I want you to write 11,000 words about app level. No, learn everything you can. Write this gigantic report. Fine. AI number two, step two. I want you to analyze the 11,000 words and look for this anchoring bias that Eric is
Mm.
talking about. This is the bias. I want you to look at what analysts are writing, look at how people are talking about this. Is this bias happen? Do you see this bias? And then I
Mm.
think you AI step number three, and then write a report about that. Then
Yeah.
step number three, AI number three. I don't know if it had to analyze both of them, but step number three is like, hey, just tell me if this is if this bias exists, if there's upside to this stock, and it could be an interesting investment.
What's the recommendation? Yeah.
What's the recommendation? And so you told me you'd done this, and you send me this whole thing describing what you did and these reports. And I was like, oh, and I went and the big one, and you had the links to the reports, and I went into that. And I was like, oh, okay. I was reading through it, and I don't know about this part about that. And then you go, oh no, I never read, I never read any of them. I just, I just read the summary, and I was like, oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah,
You had designed a process.
yeah.
You had designed, here's a you bunch of AIs, you three AIs. Here's what I want each of you to do. AI number one, you do that. AI number two, I want you to analyze AI number two's number work,
Mhm.
one's work. Three, I want you to use a little bit of this and then that, and then tell me. And I am only interested in the last two paragraphs at the end.
Yeah,
Whether this thing that Eric is talking about exists with this stock. I think it does. Tell me if
yeah.
you tell me, do the work. Tell me if it does, and I'm going to make a final decision about this.
Exactly, yeah. And it comes back to your thing of like LLMs as Excel for language, right? So if you're a financial analyst building a model, a financial model for a company, you don't go and like manually check that the Excel is doing the correct calculations like in every single cell, unless
Oh
there's a problem,
yes.
right? So you're abstract at a level. You're not hand doing the calculations to check that Excel is right. You're going, Excel works. My job is to orchestrate the flow of data from this model to give me an answer that I want, right? So LLMs are the same for language. So when I say produce a 10,000 word report on AppLovin, I'm not interested in reading that. That's just an object. It's a logical object.
It's a
If
fuel
AI,
for the
it's
yeah.
fuel. It's just an input, right? The same as I wouldn't go and check every cell in an Excel model. I'll say, here's the fuel, you AI, and then so this is kind of what I did. I said, here's Eric's article. Come up with 10 like very perceptive questions that we can interrogate like a fact base of AppLovin
Oh my
to
god,
see
use
if
my
he's right.
article to create the 10 questions.
Yeah.
Oh
So
yes,
so
wow.
your article is the inspiration for the framework, right? And then I say, okay, now if you were to do this, what fact base do you need? AI says, I need all this, gives me like a 2-page prompt. I say, okay, cool. Deep research
Go
AI,
do
go
it.
online, read 100 sources, write me a 10,000 word report that covers every single thing that we need to know. And then you just mush them together. And like, it sounds technical, but I'm not typing anything. I'm literally sitting there on my phone dictating logical steps and copy pasting stuff, right? So there's no engineering here. There's no code. Now, if you wanted to do this that can actually make investment decisions, you'd obviously do it with a lot more rigor, right? You'd check and you'd put validation and you made sure your sources were correct. You'd get analysts to cross check the
No, but
thinking. But the point is, a guy with 2 or 3 hours talking to his phone can produce a 10,000 word report, like a deeply researched, multi thousand word de anchoring bias analysis and an investment recommendation. So, like, the point is, maybe the bigger point is like we've all got this army of thinkers at our disposal 24/7 that we can orchestrate in any way you want. Like anyone who's got even access to free chat GPT is good enough. You've got infinite employees. They'll do whatever you want 24/7. And the only thing holding you back is how you're orchestrating them to process information and move it around, right?
so
So it's
so
kind of almost
Graham, this
intimidating, right?
yeah, so this is getting into, so I just want to say two big takeaways for me. Uh the first one was I kind of went a step another way. I said, well, that was really cool. What if you did it like on 100 stocks? Like
Yeah.
I want to scan for this bias, and I'm going back to that Excel for language. I'm like, wow, I usually screen for numerical pattern, the value
Mm,
could be less than this or estimate revision change or whatever, ROE. I'm like, wow, I could actually scan the entire S&P for behavioral patterns.
mm,
Um, and so that thing was like a whole new interesting concept of
yeah.
investment analysis,
Yeah.
behavioral patterns as an investment style. Um, but then the other thing, this is what you were getting to, that this is the next thing on our list of rabbit holes to go down, is we started thinking about, well, how does this change the entire nature of work?
Mm,
And like you said, you ended it by saying we all have an unlimited, you know, white collar workforce out there now, and they're getting better by the day. What do we, there's the kind of like threat but also opportunity, and like
mm,
how do we all fit into this, and how do we adjust to this, and where could this go? And I thought, well, we kind of were. I thought that the secret or the answer was in what you did. And
Mm,
I was like, okay, well, what did Graham do and what did he not do? He identified what he thought was a money making, or like what was the should be, what was the interesting piece of work to do?
mm,
What could be a profitable thing to focus on?
yeah.
Finding a bias in this stock. Then you designed a flow of you designed what you wanted to look for, and then how it should be done
Mm.
and the steps, and then you had to make a judgment call at the end. So it's kind of like, and what do we call this, Graham?
So this is like your container analogy, right? So we're
No,
kind
but
of
we
like
have the word. There's a catchy phrase for this.
well, orchestration,
Or thinking like a CEO.
thinking like a CEO. Yeah, exactly.
We said, this is kind of like, and this was, and you said, I said, Graham, I said, you never read the original report. He goes, yeah, but that's what CEOs do. Like I was, we don't read every report that the analysts write, and we just want the end
Yeah.
answer.
I mean, just on a
And
simpler level, like on LinkedIn, you'll see loads of people complaining, like, "Oh, you didn't write this post. Like AI wrote it for you." And like from a CEO point of view, like, of course I didn't write the post. Like, why would I? Like, if it either it's a human agency or an analyst or a writer, or it's an AI. So I think from a CEO mindset, like you would never do anything yourself, right? You would get someone to do it for you. You would just interrogate the thinking, design the process, align it with the strategy, make sure it's properly resourced. But like, a CEO of a big bank, they're not reading every report that comes through that bank. They're relying on their
Graham,
staff to analyze, right?
this
And
comes
interrogate and
naturally to you, right? So
yeah,
you've been a
yeah,
CEO, and you're always thinking that balance of what things should I do or delegate and not do, and where is the
mm,
best use of my brain focus.
yeah,
But I think for the vast majority of people, I think this is not something that
yeah,
thing how they think all day.
mm,
But I think this is going to be the key to succeeding in the AI world, is
yeah,
shifting to this. Like I need to be, if I'm doing something that is grunt work, what would a C let's take me, like, do the
yeah,
context. Let me take me out of what would a CEO think of this situation?
exactly.
Should I be doing this? Should an AI be doing this? And if the answer is I'm shouldn't be doing that, like, you need to, adjust, shift, replace,
Yeah,
just like that's the wave that's coming. And I think that's I was like, what I liked about it is think like a CEO. And I think that'll just is an easy catch-all, that it will kind of reframe your situation is would a CEO be what would a CEO think of this situation?
yeah,
Would a CEO be doing this thing? Or would he
mm,
be orchestrating the AIs to do it?
exactly. Yeah. So and that's the catch is we're all suddenly CEOs, whether we like it or not, right? Because you've actually got an army of free employees, as
Yes.
many as you want, and the only limit on your productivity and effectiveness is orchestrating them. So what does a CEO do? They set a direction, they make sure that they've got the right team, and they plow resources into it. They don't write email, like write reports or read reports, or they shape and they orchestrate. So I think people, like you say, people are not used to doing that, and it's actually a hard thing to get used to. Even if even when you start trying to be a CEO, it takes a hell of a long time to learn how to do it because it's kind of so abstract versus
It's
concrete work.
basically
And
you're
so,
abstracting
yeah,
yourself up to a higher level of work. And I think those key things, it's like direction. What do CEOs do?
yeah,
They see direction, they see goals,
mm,
they design processes, and they kind of have judgment about
yeah,
I think at the end, judge the work that's come out.
mm,
Not that I'm a
yeah,
CEO either, so
yeah, yeah.
I'm just
No, sure, but I mean, yes, as you say, it's a mindset that it's not a useful mindset in the old world, like from 2 or 3 or 5 years ago, because
yeah.
the only way you can have a team of employees to do whatever you ask is to raise capital and get the position and whatever. So it's like a weird thing that very, very few people do. Suddenly, it's like billions of people on Earth can all be CEOs as long as you can get access to free ChatGPT. You've got a smartphone and internet connection. You can orchestrate a team of knowledge workers, right? I saw a quick question pop up on the live
Oh,
stream there,
awesome.
which was interesting, and it was just like, do the models differ? Yes, they do differ a lot. So I did a workshop with a few dozen CEOs on this topic, and they were using a specific prompt. And the guys who used Grok had a very different reaction from the ones who used Claude or Gemini, etc. So there are like built-in biases and personalities in the different models, and like you kind of got to play with it to figure that out. And now we're also getting to the era where you can get to the point of like personalized models, so you can build clones of your own
Graham,
mindset,
your
etc.
whole thing was making me think it might be worth downloading the llama model to I don't know if it's an AWS instance or how you do it, but
Yeah,
there's now a return to like teaching a model have to have gone through all these context and these business done all this context engineering with a model. It would be,
yeah,
you'd like it to stick with it, or
yeah.
know
So
it for the next
I
thing.
exactly. So I think where it's going, like if you just hack this together in ChatGPT, you run out of thread eventually. You have to keep clicking in between threads. So the where it's going to be in a few years is everyone has got these persistent personalized AIs that are like Graham's financial analyst for his stock portfolio, Graham's operations helper who does all his day-to-day maintenance of his Substack and whatever. You can imagine all the different roles that like an aristocrat would have in the past in their personal staff. Each of those will be a personalized AI that has multiple years of memory and context about you as an individual. At the moment, we have to hack that together with generic
Or
models
right
and
now, I'm just
threads.
using like ChatGPT is the same AI for everybody, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
adjust.
yeah,
It doesn't. I mean, it kind of knows a little bit from talking to you.
yeah.
I wanted to say on the nature of work. I think, and I wrote that post about the containerization of thought, and
Mm,
you and I went down this analogy of the shipping container and how there was the first order effect and the second order effect, and these kind of
mm,
like, oh, it's cheaper to ship things, and that's like the first 6 7 years, and then later on, it's like, oh wow, the whole geography of the world economy changes, and
mm,
people manufacturing gets unbundled, sent to China, and all these second order effects are harder to see. But I think one thing, but just still a little bit on the topic of work.
mm,
I think the piece that's going to get better in the years ahead is the AI to AI interaction. And I think that is going to get faster. That's the container piece, right? The containers move around, information move around. So we're on this like, how does what happens in the office? We process information, we share information. How does that all happening? That's happening. I'm sending an email to you. Oh, let me
mm.
send you the PowerPoint or the PDF. There's going to be this whole new way of information processing between intelligent beings or
Yeah.
AIs, and they're going to be using code and JSON and SQL databases. And anyways,
Mm,
I kind of and I suspect that will be a superior way to for information to be value added, and one AI
yeah.
adds to this and that. And so I kind of came back to I think when you're also and this is on the personal level, like we were like,
Mm,
okay, how's things going to change? How does my own job or my own situation sit in this whole thing? I think the
mm,
one filter was like, do the CEO analysis, right? What would a CEO do? I think the second thing is, what we're all saying, like, does AI help me with my job? And okay, that's one thing. I think another one is, how could I help an AI do this job? Like,
yeah.
what if in the
Yeah.
future
Yeah.
the mainstream of this thing is 10 AIs, Graham's AIs all talking to each other, and you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm an investment analyst. What do I add to this process? And
Yeah.
just as a real example on this, I mean, just sometimes like, and I don't know how that answer to that question for a lot of other things, but in investment analysis, for example, AIs are really bad with accounting and financial modeling. Like,
Mm,
I do a lot of forward estimates with Excel models, right? The AIs are terrible. If I see a number, AIs guess when they say this stuff. So I was like, okay, maybe the analyst, the fundamental analyst guy, maybe it's really about him understanding the company and doing a forward financial estimate, but then writing the report about it is the AI's job. Or I don't know,
yeah.
something
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
something
So
like.
there's a really interesting related question which has come through on the stream, which is, what do
Oh
we do
yeah.
about checking
I'm
for
glad you're checking these
correctness
things.
and preventing wrong responses and hallucinations? And like that's not a new problem, right? So if we're talking about CEO mode, like that's what something that CEOs deal with every day. People hallucinate, they get things completely wrong, and it messes up your business and costs you a lot of money. So a huge part
Mm.
of running any organization is inserting process controls, audits, quality assurance, quality checks. You have entire departments of your company that just check the work that other people do, right? So it's the same in an AI domain. Like you're saying, first of all, it's an awareness that, for example, AIs are terrible at financial modeling. So it's like, and that's the same way you'd know the people in my organization. I've got a really strong finance team, but my sales team sucks. I need to do something to build them up, right? So, you kind of have this awareness of what your capabilities are, and then, as the leader of the organization, you then put the right processes and controls in. So you might say, I'm really worried about the sales team. We actually need to put a quality control process in place. We need to have the right rubrics. We need to measure them. We need to incentivize them. And you can do the same thing with AI outputs, where you can put strict quality controls in. So have a quality control agent that
Yeah.
rigorously checks every single thing. Have you can just imagine like the sky's the limit, but people are thinking in this like super linear way of just like write me this report. It's like, no, do the deep research to fuel the report,
And
figure
there'll
out
be an
what
AI to
questions to
check it
ask,
later.
get another AI to cross check it and criticize it, get a committee of AIs to review the critical reports and identify and flag key items, use that to figure out how the organizational and processes sort of issues need to be resolved at a deeper level in your overall structure. Like there's just so much that you need to do. So people are like, AIs hallucinate. I'm like, yeah, so do people. I've dealt with this as a person running like a multi-hundred person organization. People constantly get things wrong, and they steal and they lie and they do all sorts of crazy stuff, and that's
So
just a
nothing
day in the
new.
life of any manager, right? At least AIs don't intentionally try and deceive you. Well, some of the time they do,
Maybe they
but
will.
that's not a new problem, right? It's not a new problem at all. You need to, but what people don't know is that any organization in the background has its own police force, its own judges, its own
Mm.
auditors. It's got everything. So you need to have that if you want to work with these virtual knowledge workers. You've got to have processes and structures to check stuff. But obviously, you don't check everything. You check stuff in terms of the risk that it creates for the final output that you want. So um, if anyone's interested in these ideas, like your best starting point is High Output Management by Andy Grove, who sort of like articulated a lot of this management thinking. And like you can kind of take high output management and apply it to a team of AIs and you'll get very far, right? But it's kind of the same thing of like we all need to start thinking more as designers and orchestrators of organizations rather than as individuals popping out individual kind of work products, right?
So Graham, going down the second order effects rabbit lists again. So
Yes.
we were kind of doing the container analogy, right? And we were thinking when when it became more cost effective and easier to ship things across the world with one 20-foot
Mm,
container, companies in the US, the forward thinking companies thought, I don't actually need to have a factory here in the US. And actually, maybe that's a
mm,
liability and a disadvantage. And I'm going to actually outsource the manufacturing of this to China, some company 5,000 miles away. And so, like Nike or like when Apple, you open a box and it
mm.
says, designed in California. And then the next sentence should be, but manufactured by Foxconn
Yeah.
in Taiwan
Yeah.
or Guangzhou or
Yeah.
wherever. And Nike, same thing. They don't make that. They just like, let's focus on the branding, the design, the marketing, the advertising, and the actual making of the shoe. We don't do that anymore. That's not.
Mm,
So that's unbundling, right? And how the business and containers changed the business model. And I'm like, so we were thinking, like, how does it change
mm,
businesses today if there's basically this now? I like it kind of feels like we had China for manufacturing. We kind of have China for white collar work. Like everyone has unlimited AIs and they're
mm.
and they're going to be able to integrate more into what we do increasingly. How does that change the business
Yeah.
and what we and how businesses work? And um so we took a stab at that.
Yeah.
And I think one just first reaction was it makes it a lot easier. The same way someone said, "Oh, if I would like to create a shoe company," it's like, fine, you don't have to have fact. You can outsource. Someone in China can make you the shoes. Just send a picture. What you want the shoe look like. It'll be here. And I don't have to have a store. Amazon can make a store. It's like another one of these things where
Mm,
I don't even have to have workers. I have instant workers everywhere, right? It's that
yeah.
workers are no longer a scale benefit or some kind of barrier to entry of a business.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's really interesting. There was a question that came through there just around
Oh,
the App 11 process, which was broadly right. But maybe if people are curious about it, um, I can maybe write up the App 11 thing and put it out on my newsletter, which is Phase
oh
Transitions,
yeah,
with
yeah.
your
Send
permission,
your
I'd say. Yeah,
my
yeah,
Graham's newsletter is phase transitions, which is that
yeah.
that cool scientific thing. Um,
So I'll write
I
it up
think
there. These questions just stream past, and you can't even keep up with them. So thanks to whoever asked the question. I'll write that up as a Phase Transitions piece at some point. There's another question there after experimenting with different models. What's your favorite model and why? I think just ChatGPT, just because it can do lots of different stuff, but I'm not like very religious about it. I just like the fact that I've got like deep research and I've got all sorts of different flavors from 4.5 all the way down to 4.0. Like I'm just familiar with it and comfortable with it, but I'm definitely not going to argue that it's the best. It just works well for me. Eric, on this question of like containerization of thoughts, I guess the interesting thing for me is like who wins and who loses is one place to start thinking about it, right?
yes,
So like containers was like rural people in China won because they had this society that was well set up for mass manufacturing, but the
they're
only
now
problem
like
was they were,
interlinked into a
yeah,
global manufacturer.
exactly.
Yes,
So they were just far from markets. The only problem was they were far from markets, and containerization solved that. And then people in Rust Belt America, unfortunately, got disadvantaged by it because they were in the right place originally, but then with containers, they were suddenly in the wrong place. So I guess one way to think about it in terms of different industry segments, in terms of different populations, in terms of different countries, is to say who gets advantaged by us being able to like containerize thought. Like where are the people or societies where there's lots of good orchestrators who can take advantage, and where are the societies where our previous inability to do this actually has protected a class of people who maybe don't have as much to add in the modern world, right? Just like those Rust Belt workers got disadvantaged by containerization, what is the modern equivalent? And you need to start. I don't have the answers to that,
is
but
it
I think we all need to.
lawyers?
I don't know.
I
Maybe
don't
they
know.
get
You don't know.
to
Okay, I
elevate
don't know.
themselves up a
But
notch,
you're
right? I
like
hope.
just setting. Here's the frame. I thought the
Yeah.
container is a good way to think. Like exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of saying, okay, so is it lawyer? So then you can start thinking that problem through. Okay, well, what is the stuff that a lawyer actually does? One of the things they do is they like talk to clients and take personal risk on the solution. So an AI can't do that, but it can do a lot of the research and the original drafting. So how does that shift the power balance between lawyers and their clients? As one example, you can think of different countries. Like I'm in South Africa, you're in the UK, a lot of people in the States. How does that shift things around? Does it make some workers more productive? Does it disadvantage some industry segments? So I haven't even started to really think that through. And I'm sure there's some smart people in the audience who've thought a lot more than us. So I'd love to hear from those people, and I'm sure you would too. So hit us up with your ideas as you go through it. Um, how do you make sure ChatGPT will remember you is another question. I'm just, so what a lot of people aren't aware of is that ChatGPT actually keeps a central core memory, which it sort of averages across a lot of your different conversations. So you might have been freaked out by that if you're a ChatGPT user, where it suddenly knows a whole lot of facts about you. So you can
Yes.
actually click on it in the settings, and you can download it yourself if you want to look at it. But it keeps this pretty elaborate and built up memory of you as an individual, which is separate to any threads and which isn't obviously visible to you on the surface. So it keeps a profile on you, and it
But you
uses
notice
that
it
profile.
sometimes when you ask it, it suggests something. Oh, since you already
Yeah,
know this,
yeah.
like how did that was from
Yeah,
like
so
a week
so
ago. I
it, yeah,
discussed that. Yeah.
it builds a personal profile, and then within each thread, it's got a context window of like what happened in this thread, and it's obviously not only literally looking at what you said, but it also is looking at what's implicit. It's figuring out like these aren't raw LLMs. There's a whole orchestration layer that these companies have built on top of it to make them behave in the right way, and a lot of that is not visible to us as users. So the next step in all of this is people are going to start building like personal clone AIs. So that's like, for example, an Eric AI, which is trained on the full corpus of YWR writing in every single podcast on YouTube he's ever been on, that then becomes the enlarged memory, and we can all go and type in and chat to Eric about his thinking, right?
I've been working
But
on that. It's hard.
but it is hard. But because the tech is escalating so exponentially and
Yeah.
rapidly, I think it's going to hit us much sooner than we expect, right? Yeah,
Yes. I think another thing we thought was, and thanks for watching the questions.
cool.
That just this is going to kind of like the internet, like there'll be more entrepreneurs, right? There's just hey, I got this idea, and you start chatting, and it's telling you, oh, well, then you need to do this, and next step you should do that. And not that all businesses should be launched, but this definitely narrows the chasm of intimidation, I mean, and we thought, if there's more of this, and you also said this, Graham, that
Mm,
it questions the whole, there's it was a concept you were writing about, basically the scale of the benefit a company has of having all these employees, and
mm,
having them as employees versus contractors, and
yeah,
that may change, and that we might have a breakdown, or more companies that are just a lot of interrelated consultants behind the scenes, or small
yeah,
businesses. And so
yeah,
we're like, if there's the one, step one is it makes it easier to start a new business. Step two, that might be more of how things work in the future. And then if that's the case, is the benefit behind this whole system the stuff like AWS? Is it like for,
mm,
Facebook for advertising for these businesses?
yeah,
And does it come around in this system? Do the enablers and the infrastructure, the ports of the container system effectively,
yeah,
are they
yeah.
a way to play it?
Yeah, for sure. So, so to kind of build on that, like why would you have an internal team in a company instead of delegating it to an external company? The reason you do it is because there's a lot of like overhead of managing that. So if you have an internal marketing team, they're there and they have the context, they know what's going on. If you delegate it to an agency, it might be more efficient and cheaper, but there's a lot of work to maintain the context and the accountability. So companies get bigger because they don't want the overhead and the cost and the energy of maintaining that communication
And
and
there's also
context.
friction of renegotiating contracts every
Exactly.
time.
Exactly. But with AI, suddenly the friction of analysis and negotiation and discussion and context becomes a lot lower because it's a lot easier to create information, to do analysis, etc. So suddenly on the margins, a company starts saying, well, I think I will outsource my marketing department because I can get cheaper people who are AI powered on the outside, and I can manage
And what if
them
the
and keep them
marketing department
accountable.
is an AI on demand that just switches on right when you want it?
For sure. So those sorts of things are more subtle, like structurally in the economy. Then, like as you said, do we get more smaller companies, more startups, less big companies? I don't know. Maybe it dramatically expands the scale of things like the giants like AWS and Meta. So we don't know.
Yeah,
We're kind
yeah.
of speculating, but these are the right things to think about. Just on that, remember you question before I forget, because it's quite an important point. Like a nice hack that you can do if you're using ChatGPT a lot or any other LLM is you can ask it to make a summary file of what happened in the thread that's relevant. So, say for example, you're discussing like your marketing plan and you're going back and forth and you don't want to forget key stuff. You can ask it, just create a summary document and give it to me as whatever format you like, and then keep it
Yes.
aside and then re-upload that the next time.
Yes.
Or say it's got a particular personality that you like you've managed to prod it into being pragmatic and commercial and whatever. You can say, hey, please create a little document that summarizes the key elements of your current persona, and it'll just do it for you. So you can kind of zoom out from the thread and stop doing the work and say to the thread, hey, give me something I can take away from this and use in another context, right?
And
And
that's
that's an
really good when
important
you do
trick
a
to
big
remember.
project with
Yeah,
ChatGPT, that sometimes, yes, you do need a snapshot of what you've done so far. So you don't, because it will
exactly.
sometimes hit the end of its
Yeah,
context window.
of its runway. Yeah. Talking of hitting the end of the runway, how are we doing
I
on
think we're
time?
wrapping up. We'll keep it. We've hit all the main topics, and I don't know if there's any other questions, but guys, thanks very much. So Graham is on Substack as well. It's phase transitions,
Yeah,
and he's going to be writing about all this stuff. And I hope it was helpful, guys. Thank you.
brilliant. Yeah, and thanks Eric so much for hosting me. And just reminder to everyone to go subscribe to YWR. I
Oh,
look forward to keeping in touch with everyone. Thanks so much.
thanks everyone.